Good morning. Welcome to the BCP Council Cabinet for Wednesday, the 27th of May 2020. My name is Councillor Vicky Slade. I'm leader of the council, and we are commencing with our second virtual cabinet meeting. I'm going to pass over to our Democratic Services Officer, who will read out the notice regarding how this Skype meeting will be managed, and we'll then commence the meeting. So, Sarah, can I pass over to you, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Please note that this meeting of the Cabinet is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to by the Chairman. State your name before you speak if you have not been introduced by name. Some people may need to dial into the meeting and will therefore not have the benefit of the visual images. Mute your microphone when you are not talking. For those that are part of the meeting, if you would like to speak, please type RTS, request to speak, in the instant message conversation panel on the left-hand side of your screen and click the arrow button to send. Please note this panel is visible to all parties. If you are able to, it may be helpful to indicate the particular issue you wish to speak on in order to try to maintain the flow of the meeting. If there are any recommendations moved that require a formal vote, these will be carried out by the Chairman, asking for a response of for, against or abstain from each councillor on the Cabinet. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum as far as possible, and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Very much for that, Sarah. Okay, so we'll move through the agenda. So the next item on the agenda is apologies for absence, and I don't believe we have any apologies for absence today. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest. I've not received any declarations of interest. Are there any disclosable pecuniary interests or local declarable interests? Okay, I'm going to take that as a no, disclosable interests. Agenda item 4 is public issues. There have been no questions or petitions submitted from members of the public on this occasion. There have been a number of emails from members of the public received in relation to agenda item 16, which deals with traffic regulation matters. Copies of these emails have been circulated to all Cabinet members prior to the meeting today for them to read, and Cabinet will take these representations into account when considering the matters under agenda item 16 later in the meeting. Oh, I'm sorry, Margaret. I've missed the minutes, but I'm a bit confused because it's not on the list. So, confirmation of the minutes. As you know, last month I was not present for the video side of the call. I was on the telephone. Therefore, do we have a proposer who was in the full meeting to confirm the minutes?
Yes, it's Councillor Howell here. I chaired the meeting and I will propose it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howell. Do we have a seconder?
Yes, Councillor Margaret Phipps. I'm happy to second.
Councillor Phipps. Thank you very much, Councillor Phipps. Apologies for that. Well spotted. So just making sure you're all concentrating. Agenda item 5, which is recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Board. We do have some specific recommendations that are on the agenda. Can I just pass to Councillor Broadhead? Were there any other items you needed to bring that are not already on the agenda?
Thank you very much, Chair. As you said, there's a number of recommendations for items for Cabinet items, but no further recommendations outside of Cabinet items from the Overview and Scrutiny Board. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so that moves us on to agenda item 6, which is our first substantive item, which is the update on the BCP Council's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. This is going to be presented by the Chief Executive, Graham Farrant. I'm happy to propose this. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah, sorry, I had to unmute there. Sorry, it's Councillor Howell. I will second that.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to hand over to the Chief Exec, and then I will add a couple of words, and then I'll invite Cabinet members to comment relating to their item following that. So Chief Executive, can I pass to you, please?
Thanks, Lou. Thanks very much. I won't do much by way of an introduction. The report is a slightly different style than other reports in the sense it's just trying to give Cabinet and all members an update on where we are with our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. As we discussed last month, it's had a huge impact on the Council and on our services generally. We're now beginning to come into a loosening of the lockdown, and that is creating different pressures on our services, whether it's the reopening of seafront services, toilets, etc., car parks, grounds maintenance, and household waste recycling centres. So a whole load of services changing. We've also got a lot of pressure at the moment on adult social care in particular, where we're developing a response to care homes planning and to the pressures on care homes that have been well publicised locally and nationally. We're also now preparing a local outbreak management plan, which is the next stage of beginning to think about how we can move into a loosening of the lockdown. I think the other issue to mention is the reopening of the retail trade in particular. Following the move to get more people back to work, government has indicated moves to start relaxing the closures of retail, and that will again put pressure on the way that we manage our town centres and manage our urban spaces. In the last couple of days, we have had another allocation of funding from via BEIS, Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, to allow us to manage the town centres more effectively, and MHCLG combining on that. So a number of things going on, a lot of changes. I have to say the situation changes so that daily, so by the time we've sent this report out, is already up to date. We can give updates on the numbers if anybody needs those, but it's a really fast developing position, and it has, as I say, impacted on the Council dramatically, whether it be on the budget right the way through to the way that we provide our services. I'm not sure I want to give any more update on that by way of introduction, but happy to take any questions and keep members informed as best we can.
Thank you very much for that, Graham. If I can just add that the reference in the report talks about response and recovery. I think we are generally speaking still in response in most areas, but we're also working hard on the recovery phase with the development of the economy recovery team, the transformational recovery team. The other thing I think that's quite important to add is that having redeployed over 600 members of staff to different roles, some of those individuals need to return to positions as those services restore, which is going to have an impact upon how we transition from that current role to the next. And obviously we still have a number of people who are shielding. The government extended the shield period, but one really important factor is we've now assisted 20,000 people through our community hub, which is absolutely fantastic. So we are actively continuing to support people, and in the last week, as some people have returned to work, we've had a new cohort of volunteers who are now stepping into those shoes, where people are no longer able to carry on volunteering. So I think the Council's responded incredibly quickly to everything. So I'm going to pass over to a number of members for their to add a few comments. Councillor Moore, would you like to update us with regards to schools and children?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Regarding schools, as we know, the government wants children in early years settings, reception, year 1 and year 6, to return to school on the 1st of June. Everyone will no doubt be aware nationally of some of the unions' reaction about schools opening. However, locally, the head teachers do want to make it work, and BCP has hosted regular meetings and workshops with head teachers, the trust CEOs and the Regional Schools Commissioner to help them to welcome children and staff safely back into school. The government has also just announced Year 10 students will have more contact with teachers from the 15th of June, and that's in addition to their existing remote learning, and apparently Year 12 is to be included after that, but guidance on this is still awaited. Primary, secondary schools and early year settings have canvassed parents and are risk assessing their sites to ensure social distancing, and they're assessing measures to keep pupils safe because safety is everyone's top priority. All our schools are, of course, already open for the children of key workers and vulnerable pupils and students. Professional advice is it would not be good educationally and for the holistic well-being for some children to receive no education or contact for 6 months. However, parents will not be fined if they choose not to send their children to school. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Debman, did you want to give us an update on our adult social care and health areas?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Well, as you can imagine, it's a huge department and it's a really, really busy time. So I want to thank everybody for everything they're doing because they're working flat out. And it's also the carers in the community that are working flat out. So I must say that it's not only our council staff. And on a technical point, which I always hate reading these things out, but I will, the Care Act 2014 easements under the Coronavirus Act, there you go, so you've got it. The Director of Social Care has agreed to 3 level 2 easements, which just need to be noted, which are the day centres and the services closed due to social distancing. I'll have a word about day centres in a minute, but provisions have been put in place, so we're only charging for those provisions where they're equal to a day centre session. So the sensory loss team, as you can imagine, can't do their work by phone or video, so that has had to be stepped down a bit. And some adaptation work on people's properties, for example, bath rails, things like that, which again, with distancing, that can't be performed at the moment. And they're going to be reviewed and stepped up as and when possible. And I'd just like to say a bit on the day centres, because I think this is really interesting, that everybody has now embraced technology, I think, from the youngest to the oldest, including myself. And we've got a really, really innovative range of activities. We've got gardening classes, photography, Pilates. I won't go on, but we have got a lot of things that the people that would normally be at day centres are able to do. And I think this is one of the really good things for the future, that we're putting in place something new. So that is the good news. The bad news is that we've got a bit of a rise in safeguarding referrals and some concerns about self-care, which I think is understandable. This is a horrible time for everybody. And they're being followed up absolutely as they would outside the pandemic period, so there's no need to worry about that. Hospital discharges are still under this pressure to go out in 1 hour and then placed in 2 hours. Our staff are working incredibly hard on that. It's been a terrific effort by all concerned. I'm not going to mention the care home death figures, mainly because I don't actually have the current ones. So unless anybody is very, very keen to hear those, I won't go into that. The PPE, which has been a hot potato and is now cooling down a bit with any luck. But I say that care homes have always had PPE. There's never been a problem. They've always ordered it. The problem has come because everybody else has been ordering it. And as everybody knows, I think we get a lot of supplies from overseas. Councillor Broadhead's ONS committee board, set up a task and finish group to look into that. And I think their conclusions have been circulated to all members of the Cabinet. And the figures that I have for last week were that the council has distributed 55,000 items, and of that 28,500 were face masks. So we are certainly pulling our weight in distributing to the care homes who have run out. Leader, I won't say much more on that unless anybody wants to ask a question. So thank you very much for the chance.
We'll just cover the other information giving, and then we can deal with any questions and the overview and scrutiny chair as well. So Councillor Phipps, you were next.
Hello. Yeah. as far as planning is concerned, everything's running fine. All I want to say, and I will be very brief, is that I do personally think that this council has given an exceptional response to this situation that we've all found ourselves in. I'd like to thank officers and the leader for all their hard work. The leader in particular has been the public face of this council and been seen across the whole area, and I think there has been a fantastic job done by this whole council at this difficult time, and I think it's really worth saying that, and that's why I've said it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps. That's very kind of you. Councillor Howell.
Yes, thank you. I'm been chairing a number of meetings with local business partners with regard to helping the business community to deal with various COVID issues. The council, in my view, has responded very well to this scenario in terms of supporting the various grants that the government has been channeling through us, and also providing information on the website through our other channels. However, there is still there's always more that can be done, and we're working to make sure that that information it gets to everybody who needs it needs to, and also putting together various policies and procedures, particularly around social distancing in town centres and other busy places. There is also an ongoing cultural action group, and one of the streams of work in that cultural action group is looking at how culture will respond and recover from the COVID situation. So I think that's all I was going to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, Councillor Wilson.
Yes, I just wanted to say that we're still housing 300 people in temporary accommodation. We're still making thousands of welfare calls to our council tenants. So nothing's really changed. We're still working significantly hard. However, the only change that I would mention is that choice-based lettings opened in between my update overview and scrutiny and now. So that'd be all I'd like to say.
Thank you. Councillor Broadhead, you wanted to update from Overview and Scrutiny Board.
Thank you very much, Chair. Not particularly much to add, except to say that there's no formal recommendations for the board. A brief update on how scrutiny is continuing to operate in this time. As per the revised constitution, government guidance and regulations, we continue to channel the main COVID scrutiny through the main board. And once again, on behalf of the board and all other councillors, echoing a lot of the sentiments that have come through, I think our staff and community have stepped up magnificently during this period. Councillor Dedman touched briefly on the working group that we put together around PPE, which I think was a really good, sharp, targeted bit of work that put to bed a lot of the concerns that were out there, and certainly I was satisfied as chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Board that provision was adequate during this time. The only thing to add is that, as mentioned earlier on, we split our COVID Scrutiny Board meeting into two parts again, the operational response side and the recovery and the reset phase. I think there are still questions that we want to continue to keep an eye on and follow up, particularly in the children's services area, making sure that our vulnerable children are looked after as much as possible. That will have added complications as we start to return to school, but obviously a number of children will not still be returning to school either through parental choice or otherwise. And finally, a number of the board members were very keen to keep the focus on the economic recovery as well. The Chief Executive mentioned earlier the government grants and money that's coming through to help to reset our economy. But again, I'm hearing from lots of businesses around the conurbation that they are looking to the council to offer guidance and a framework for how to kickstart our economy again. So really need to see that work stepped up, but great work across the board from everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. I think you'll find those things are happening, you are involved with them, and we are updating people on a regular basis. So I'm afraid I wouldn't agree that we are not keeping in touch, because our economy team are actually writing to businesses every day with updates, and we've kept them fully up to date with what's available in terms of advice, grants, etc. Councillor Hadley, you wanted to quickly cover something, and then Councillor Dedman wanted to correct a figure, and then I think we'll move on to the next item. Councillor Hadley?
Yes, just ever so quickly. Obviously, in terms of the physical distancing measures that the Secretary of State, Grant Shapps, advised some weeks ago, we're still awaiting confirmation of the funds available for that. There's been over 500 measures that have been identified as possible candidates, and we're working to a priority list and cracking on with that.
Thanks, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Dedman, you wanted to clarify a figure.
Yes, I just want to clarify something in the report, although I said I wouldn't get into figures, but in item 18 in the report, it's about the care outbreaks in care homes. And I think the report says, if I haven't actually brought it up, it says it's 33% of care homes have an outbreak, but in fact it's 27%. I say that because it's better. So thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Dedman. Does anyone have any questions for the Chief Executive or another portfolio holder? This is a report to note. Obviously, the whole report is in the public domain, so the public are able to read it and understand it. And as I say, we've got a lot of engagement through multiple press releases, Facebook Live, updates to councillors and MPs twice a week. So there's an awful lot of information that's going out to people to make them aware. But do anyone have any questions? No, so on that basis, we'll take that report as read. Thank you very much, Graham, for that very thorough report. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda. And the next item on the agenda is the BCP Council. Do we need to take a vote on this? It's an update, so I don't believe we need to vote. Just get clarification whether we need to vote on something which is just for information.
So, Leader, which report are you talking about? The update on COVID
update, yeah.
No, that's just for noting. So
okay, that's fine. It's just it says in my notes that we need to take a vote on it, and I wasn't aware that this was a decision, so therefore there's no need to vote.
No, I think unless anybody dissents from noting it.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, so any dissent? If there's no dissent, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, item 7. And that is the BCP Council Finance Update, which is going to be presented and proposed by Councillor Brown. And I am happy to second that item. So, Councillor Brown, can I hand over to you to introduce and present that paper? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just give a brief introduction, as this is an update report requesting Cabinet to just note the report and request further reports to come to our next Cabinet meeting in June. At the last meeting, I updated Cabinet on the early initial decisions which were made to protect the Council's financial position, particularly around expenditure controls, liquidity and financial management. This report updates the actions which are being taken to manage the inevitable significant impact on the Council's finances of this pandemic. Members will be aware that central government have now provided 2 tranches of emergency funding totalling £22 million, and Appendix 1 in the report details the return showing how the first £11 million was allocated to cover the additional costs that the Council is incurring. Since the start of this crisis, officers have been working extensively to assess the potential impact on the Council's finances in terms of additional expenditure needed, particularly in adult social care, in children's services and in the housing area, as well as assessing the potential reduction in council income, particularly income from car parks, tourism-related income, council tax and business rates income. The report details 3 different scenarios for the possible financial impact that have been developed based on the lockdown and recovery lasting either 16 weeks, 24 weeks or the full 52 weeks of the financial year. For financial planning purposes and financial management, we are assuming a 24-week impact period, which we estimate will create a £53 million pressure in this financial year, before applying the £22 million government emergency funding, leaving an estimated £31 million net budget pressure this year. The report and appendices break this down by service area and give a detailed commentary on each budget line where we anticipate a financial impact. This report details our financial strategy to address the impact in our 2020-21-22 budget and the medium-term financial plan, covering particularly government lobbying, transformation, looking at our employee cost base, looking at our expenditure cost base, resetting our services, reviewing projects, looking at our estate strategy, looking at standard accounting practices, carrying out base budget reviews and reviewing our reserves and contingencies. Progress is being made in all of these areas to inform the budget review, which will come to our June Cabinet meeting. So to sum up, our financial position is being managed day by day on the basis of our early decisions. The anticipated impact on our budget this year is a moving target, and it will vary depending on government announcements and the way that the pandemic develops. Our work to manage this impact is progressing rapidly in preparation for our updated budget position coming before Cabinet in June. Our prudent, balanced budget that was agreed in February stands us in good stead to manage this, and we will be making the necessary decisions to deal with this, and we do not anticipate the necessity for a Section 114 statement, as several other local authorities are reported to be considering. I'd just like to add that in order to manage the changing nature of this impact and maintain a flexible financial response, I am going to propose a revision to Recommendation B that's in the papers before Cabinet. I'd just like to revise Recommendation B so that it will read, request that the annual budget for 2020-21 is reviewed and an early budget monitoring report is brought forward to Cabinet in June. So I hope Cabinet colleagues are content with that. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. So there were no recommendations on the report from Overview and Scrutiny Board, but is there anything that the Council Board have wishes to speak briefly on the paper, bearing in mind there were no recommendations?
You, Chair. No formal recommendations. And just like to reiterate that obviously the revised budget will be coming forward next month and scrutiny will be looking at it at that time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So do we have any Cabinet members wishing to speak on this item, particularly with regard to obviously we need to approve an amended recommendation. I'd just like to pay tribute to the incredible work that's been done by Adam and his team to actually keep on top of this, bearing in mind that not a day goes by before a different piece of information coming out. And some of the work they're doing, they write a complete report and then the government makes an announcement late into the evening and the report needs to be rewritten overnight, which is incredible work that they've been doing. So is anybody wishing to speak on this? Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. I'd just like to support David's amendment. I think it's clear from what you just said, actually, that sorry, just turn my video on. That the situation is very fluid, and we're not looking to rebase the whole budget. We have to work with the budget that we've got and make adjustments as we go through. So I support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dedman.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, I would support that amendment, and I would add also that it's so fluid, the situation at the moment. We keep getting so many messages from central government. We also, in my department, keep getting so many added costs which are not going to be covered. We all know that. And so, yes, I would fully support that. Thank you.
It's also worth recognising that we do continue to lobby. I was mortified when I heard the Prime Minister a couple of days ago suggesting that people returning from their holidays would need to go into isolation and it would be the council's responsibility to sort them out with food and medication. I fully intend to write a letter to MHCLG to ask whether they're planning on giving us funding for that, because the purpose of our Operation Shield and our community hub was to look after the vulnerable, not holiday makers and business people who can afford to go and fly abroad. So that does give me great concern. I'm hoping that that was just made up on the spot. If not, it's more worrying. So is there anybody else wishing to speak on this item before we take it to the vote and give Adam another month's work of rebasing things? No. Okay. In that case, with the revised recommendation B, can I just confirm everyone's in favour? If anyone is not in favour, please speak now. Okay, silence. we're therefore able to take that as unanimously accepted. Thank you very much for that. Agenda item 8 is the Bournemouth Development Company LLP business plan. This is going to be presented and proposed by Councillor Howell. And the seconder for this is me. I am happy to second this. So Councillor Howell, can I pass over to you to present this report?
Yes, thank you. I think the main discussion on this item actually will relate to the comments from the Overview and Scrutiny Board. So, but just in this brief introduction, I'll just say that this business plan sets out the strategic direction of the BDC partnership, the Bournemouth Development Company, which is a joint company 50-50 between the council and a developer called Morgan Sindall. It envisages where we will take the partnership in the next 5 years, and in particular, two things to note are that we propose to look into development of a site at Chapel Lane in Poole Town Centre. I noted that was in the Echo this morning. I'd just like to make it clear that we are talking about the section of the car park which is immediately next to the Methodist Hall, not the main part of the car park, and also to recognise that the Durley Road scheme was a planning permission for that was approved in appeal, and that has now been added to the plan. Thank you. Hello?
Oh, sorry, well spotted. Thank you for that, Councillor Howell. I know we have had a recommendation from the Overview and Scrutiny Board on this one, so I'm going to pass to Councillor Broadhead to take us through that before we then open back up to the debate on this item.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. A few recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Board on this item, and it really comes down to the crux of what the Bournemouth Development Company is about and what it is designed to achieve. When Bournemouth Development Company was set up, it was never just about constructing a mechanism to bring forward individual sites for regeneration. It was always linked to the town centre vision, because it was always about enabling a very wholesome and linked view of how we regenerate our town centre in Bournemouth, because that's what it was always designed for at the time. So first of all, pleased to see that we're looking at expanding it elsewhere, because when something works, let's keep it working. However, there are some specific recommendations that came out of the board which are directly linked to that connectivity between all of the schemes, and in particular, I know we're going to be talking about winter gardens later on, but the whole point of having a number of schemes within the option agreement of the BDC was that we could utilise the profits from one scheme against the aspirations of perhaps the less profitable schemes and more culturally relevant schemes, and at the moment, certainly within the business plan that we're considering, there appears to be no mechanism to enable that to happen. So the Winter Garden scheme, for example, can and should generate a healthy surplus and profit for the council, and the intention was always to use that profit to bring forward schemes that would have even more public benefits, such as a pavilion gardens or Bath Road scheme. The other point that the Overview and Scrutiny Board raised was, again, just because options are within the option agreement and just because they have one planning permission and appeal does not mean that we have to proceed with them. And the Durley Road scheme is a particularly good example. It was unanimously rejected by the preceding authority's planning board, which gives a very good indication of the strength of feeling against that one, particularly because although it was in the initial option agreement, the scheme that's before us at the moment, which has now been won at appeal against the then council's view on that, will lose vital town centre car parking with no obvious replacement certainly tied into the scheme, and therefore just because that's there to do doesn't mean that the council should do it. So to be clear, the recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Board to Cabinet are: number one, that Cabinet carefully considers whether the proposed BDC business plan continues to reflect the council's ambitions for the future of Bournemouth Town Centre as a whole. And number two, specifically before approving the BDC business plan, that Cabinet confirms that profits achieved from projects such as the former Winter Garden site are allocated to developments such as is a pavilion garden / Bath Road, where the driver for development centres around cultural and other public benefits rather than purely profit. And finally, the Cabinet recognises that Bournemouth Council's Planning Board unanimously rejected BDC's application for Durley Road car park and considers whether this project should be deleted from the programme. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. So I'm sure there's going to be lots of people wishing to speak on this one. I am quite disappointed actually with the report there, because what you might think if you were viewing this for the first time was that the BDC business plan purely looks at profitable housing schemes, where it doesn't. It's delivered student housing, it's going to deliver private rental housing, commercial. The BDC business plan includes offices, replacement car parks and cultural experiences, as well as properties for sale. So having read the business plan, it does cover all of those things. We have seen money move retained for other projects. The issue around Durley Road, from my point of view, we're losing a small number of car parking spaces, but we're actually moving away from car parking for the future. And just to clarify, that in order to take this to appeal, BDC had to have the full consent of the council as an equal partner in that, in order to take it to appeal. So I just want to clarify that whilst the planning authority may have not liked the plan because of the loss of parking, the loss of parking, in my view, isn't considerable. Bath Road does remain in the BDC business plan, as far as I'm aware, Councillor Howell. So there is still a proposal in the business plan for a large cultural space. So perhaps you could clarify that the breadth of the business plan isn't just around profit-making housing. So I'm content to support this. Do we have anyone wishing to speak on this item? Anyone wishing to speak? No one's indicating. If nobody wishes to speak on it, then I can go back to the portfolio holder, but normally we would have the other members of the council speak first, and then the portfolio holder can respond to any comments.
Yeah, I mean, it may be it's a slightly different situation, because there's some quite in-depth comments really on some of these recommendations, but I'll speed through them as quickly as possible as we're time limited. I think firstly, the first recommendation, and Cabinet considers whether the proposed business plan continues to reflect the council's ambitions. I think it is clear that it does. There were originally 11 objectives in the original plan when the town centre vision was established in 2009. The current plan is in line with these objectives, although it has been also conformed with our current council's corporate strategy, and it has a very ambitious programme for regeneration of Bournemouth town centre. So I think the answer to that is yes. I'll address the third one next, which is related to the Durley Road scheme. This scheme has been on the books since 2012. When the BDC board suggested it. The Cabinet at the time of Bournemouth Council approved it as a residential scheme in 2014. There was suggestion in the ONS discussion that there was a conflict between the council and the planning board. That the council and the planning boards were actually in agreement that that this Durley Road scheme should be withdrawn, but actually that's not the case. The councillors at the time on Bournemouth Council, the Cabinet and the portfolio holder supported the lodging of the appeal. But the appeal was scrutinised by an inspector. The inspector said, I read, for all the reasons set above, the proposed development would not result in significant issues in relation to parking pressures on street or at nearby car parks. There are alternative car parks at Avenue Road, West Hill and the BIC. And the scheme would also bring about various safety improvements for the local residents and also the children that go to schools. So I still believe this is a very positive scheme and in support of the council's policies. This is to put it into the business plan. It's not final approval of the scheme. I believe that would come forward in a separate cabinet report. And in relation to the second item, which relates to the allocation of profits towards other schemes, particularly Pavilion Gardens and Bath Road, the council's not able to appropriate receipts from one particular source to another without putting procedures in place and cabinet approval and various other complications. But what we can potentially do is to keep the profit element that we have generate within BDC, the council's profit element, within that company for use in the future for new projects and working capital. We very much want to proceed with the regeneration of the Westover Road and Bath Road area, and I intend to form a working group of interested parties to start that process moving forward. But we, in the context of the decision today, we will have to ask officers to investigate and confirm to us that how best to move forward in terms of retaining those monies in BDC and allocating them, hopefully with matching funds from our partner to working capital and those schemes. So I would propose a revised recommendation, which will read as follows. If I can find it. Right, here we go. If my computer can play ball. The Cabinet approves the updated BDC business plan, a copy of which is set out at Appendix 3. That's item 1. Item 2, the Cabinet agrees a principle that any BCP profit within the BDC partnership, so the BCP profit, make it clear, within the BDC partnership, shall only be withdrawn pursuant to a Cabinet decision. And item 3, the Cabinet requests officers to advise Cabinet whether under the BDC partnership agreement the Council can secure a commitment to retain a significant proportion of profits within the BDC partnership to be used as reserves for general working capital and reinvestment for progression and delivery of schemes listed in the business plan. So that concludes my proposal. I have had an email from Harbour Ambition saying that they made a statement. I wonder if the Democratic officer has received that and would like to make that statement.
I wonder whether that was received in time, because there are times by which a statement has to have been received. Sarah, do we have anything from the organisation Harbour Ambition?
Unfortunately, I've just checked with a colleague. We didn't receive it in time, although it is the same gentleman that spoke at Overview and Scrutiny Board on this item. And I believe he did email in at about 12:45 yesterday, but unfortunately that hasn't been received. If you wish me to, I can read out the statement now so that we can.
It's very short, so I don't see any harm in doing so.
Okay, Sarah, would you like to read that out?
Yes, that's no problem. Okay, so the statement comes from Harbour Ambition, and the statement is as follows. Harbour Ambition wish to congratulate BCP Council for bringing forward proposals that will ultimately create a new vibrant neighbourhood and provide an opportunity to embrace innovation. We have listened to the comments made at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting, particularly the concerns raised over the timeline of the project. We believe we have identified some innovative approaches that can...
Sarah, can I just stop you?
Yeah, I've just realised that...
Sorry, Mark, this relates to power stations, so can we just refrain from... I don't know why that was brought up at this point.
Yeah, sorry, that was the wrong item.
Okay, please. Yes, It was. Sarah, I apologise for that. We will ask you to read that at the appropriate time. That this has no relationship to the item in question, so apologies for that. Councillor Howell, have you concluded what you wish to say, so I can go to Cabinet members? Yeah. Okay, Councillor Brown, you've indicated.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I just wanted to respond to the recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Board. I attended logged into the board meeting to listen to it, particularly around recommendation 2. There's one about looking at profits achieved from projects such as the former Winter Gardens site to allocate to developments like Pavilion Gardens and Bath Road. You know, just on principle, I'm not really keen on hypothecating potential future sums to specific areas and specific projects that we deem would be worthy at the moment. I think we need to, these are very long-term projects. We need to wait and see how these projects go forward and how they progress, and then look at what our future priorities are at that time, depending on what our corporate plan and our priorities, and any surplus funds that can be allocated to other projects we look at that time, rather than trying to sort of tie our hands at the moment. So I'd rather not not do what's suggested by the Overview and Scrutiny Board. Keep it flexible so that we're able to respond at the time that there are any surplus funds to fund the projects that we deem our priorities at that time. So I agree with Councillor Howell's recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Is there any other Cabinet member wishing to speak on this item? No. So if that is the case, we now need to vote on the revised recommendation in front of us, which is the original recommendation as item 1, with the addition of item 2 around the potential use of the profits and the officers' work around that. Sarah, can you just confirm that you have the wording of that amendment for the record?
Just to make it clear, there was an item 3 as well, so it's 1, 2 and 3. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Howell. Sarah, can you confirm you've got the wording, please?
Yes, I've got the wording. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Is everybody content to vote in favour of the new recommendation? Okay, I haven't had anyone indicate that they're not content, in which case we'll take that as unanimously passed. That takes us on to the next item on the agenda, which is agenda item 9, the Seascape Group Limited 5-year strategic plan. This one is due to be proposed by Councillor Wilson, and I'm happy to second this report. So Councillor Wilson, can I pass over to you on this one, please?
Okay, yes, thank you. This report outlines an ambitious 5-year plan for Seascape Group and its 2 subsidiaries, Seascape South and Seascape Homes and Property. It's in relation to, in terms of Seascape South, expanding our disabled adaptations to across the geographical area of BCP, and improving some of the business plan, branching out into things such as removal of Japanese knotweed. And within Seascape Homes and Property, we are looking to continue to purchase properties for homeless and people who are vulnerable. And also we want to expand into building and renting out private market properties. So I brought this to ONS last week, and it raised some questions from Councillor Bartlett at the meeting, and it also he has subsequently submitted questions to be answered this morning. So I'm going to briefly try and address the points he's raised. In the absence of government funding over several years, councils across the country have had to become more creative in financing its objectives and frontline services. One of our objectives, as Councillor Bartlett quite rightly pointed out, was the want to build socially rented homes. In the early 90s, grants from governments covered around 3/4 of the cost of all housing, built out at below market rent. But since 2008, this has fallen away dramatically. Cameron's Affordable Homes programme gave no money for social housing, and often May's lifting of the borrowing cap is used to ask why we're not building more. But new homes will be subject to the right to buy. Current rules mean that receipts from any sales can only cover a maximum of 30% of the cost of building new homes, with a strict time limit of 3 years to spend it in, which leaves us vulnerable to losing council land and money in the long run. In addition to this, the government in October imposed a rise in the interest rate in the Public Works Loan Board, which affected our plans going forward. However, despite this, we still intend to build social rented homes, but as part of a balanced approach. So that's why we're bringing forward this plan. With regards to Councillor Bartlett's point about it being anti-free market, I have to respectfully disagree. The company is subject to state aid rules, and the 2011 Localism Act gave councils the general power of competence to give local authorities the freedom to be creative and entrepreneurial, acting directly in the interests of their communities. Our housing strategy has not yet been produced. However, I believe we should be embracing every housing delivery method available. Bristol is one council that has done just that, setting up its own delivery company, and it uses its private sale to subsidise its affordable rent. It is a profit for purpose. So that is something that so many councils have been forced to do since austerity was implemented. We have a responsibility to continue funding our most vulnerable residents and involving ourselves in commercial activities such as those set out in the plan. It enables us to balance budgets by redirecting commercial surpluses back to the council as the sole shareholder of these companies. This comes with a degree of risk inevitably, but it is a measured risk with the aim of BCP Council's residents enjoying the benefits that come from this. With the country potentially about to go into deep recession, we obviously must assess this strategic plan and deal with the circumstances as and when they present themselves. However, with a funding gap and an unmet housing need across BCP, this 5-year plan may actually have more merit now. Our desire to build social housing is still very strong, and in June we will bring forward the first social rented development, something that hasn't been done in the Bournemouth neighbourhood for over 20 years. However, I think it is important to stress that building homes is just one strand of this plan. Seascape South does a lot more than that. Its disabled facilities grant funded adaptation to homes and the acquisition of homes to house some of our most vulnerable who have been homeless is really essential work. Securing those 26 properties over the next few years will enhance our delivery of housing first, and that will change lives. Seascape is a key tool in our overall approach to housing. So that's really my opening, and I'm happy to pass it over now.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. I've had a message from Councillor Broadhead that there's no request to speak relating to overview and scrutiny. They didn't make any recommendations on this particular item. So therefore, is there any Cabinet member that wishes to speak on this item? Brown.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to add slightly to what Councillor Wilson had just said and pick up particularly on his point about profit with a purpose. And I'm a great believer in, councils inevitably, because of the years of austerity, need to be commercially minded, need to have commercial operations. But for me, we need to retain the fact that we are a local authority. We're not just running companies and operating commercially purely for profit, but actually we need to have profit with a purpose. There needs to be not just financial benefit from what we're doing, but there needs to be social benefit, and local communities need to be able to recognise that what we're doing is benefiting them, is benefiting people in their community. And for me, Seascape does exactly that. It's looking at providing housing, it's looking at using the disabled facilities grant to provide to actually construct better facilities for our disabled residents. So for me, it's the ideal mixture between a commercial operation and us as a local authority fitting in with our corporate priorities to deliver services for residents and communities within the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole area. So yeah, I'm fully in support of the proposal and the business plan.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. And as chair of the Seascape Group board, it's just to clarify, there's no disclosable pecuniary interest for myself or the other board member, Councillor Howell, as we are not unpaid in that role. It's part of our role as leader and deputy leader of the council. I I would just concur with that. The work that Seascape are doing is a fantastic addition to the work of the council. The other area of Seascape's work is some of our building work, which we would otherwise have to take out to tender, and we can respond very, very quickly to responses within our estate to do those pieces of work. So I completely support it. I think the other thing to say is this strategic plan is ambitious. It takes Seascape to a new level. It has sort of trod water for the last few years, which is understandable with the change from Bournemouth Council to BCP, and also as a new organisation it takes a little while to bed in. So I'm really excited that we've been able to take a really ambitious plan forward, and the board are looking forward to having a workshop with the board members of the two subsidiaries so that we can all share our ambition and really create an organisation that works hard to deliver our corporate objectives. So anybody else wishing to speak on this? If not, I shall pass back to Councillor Wilson if he's got any summing up to do. And if he has no summing up, then we will go direct to the decision.
I think it's just to reiterate what yourself and Councillor Brown have said. You know, I think that everything we do should have a purpose, and whether that's generating profit, whether it's whatever service we provide, we should be doing it for a reason. We are a local authority. So yeah, I just fully endorse this plan.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. So that takes us to the vote. So can I confirm if everybody happy to accept the recommendations as per the report? Okay, I've had no dissent, so I'm going to take that as a unanimous decision to approve the Seascape 5-year strategic plan. That takes us on to agenda item 10, which is the Transforming Cities Fund programme. This one is being proposed by Councillor Hadley, and do I have a seconder?
Yes, I'm happy to second that. That's Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. So I'm going to pass straight over to Councillor Hadley to introduce this paper. Thank you.
We've been preparing a bid for Transforming Cities Fund most of last year. We put the bid in November, and we learned that we were successful on the 20th of March, which was, of course, right in the middle of the COVID emergency. We've been successful in getting £79 million of government funding for the Transforming Cities Fund routes, which are key sustainable transport corridors, bus, walking and cycling routes. That needs £6.1 million of match funding from ourselves and 15 million match funding from partners and developers in order to progress it. It's really helpful that we've established that we don't need to go through further business case rounds with this, because that could be a really onerous process. As I said, it took nearly a year to do the preparation initially. But the COVID impact has been quite significant in terms of the work that we were hoping to do in the near future around consulting with the public about the routes and the style of those and how those work. So we're having to move to setting up virtual workshops and virtual consultation with people to do that. This paper sets out the governance for the process, and that there'll be quarterly updates back to Cabinet, that TROs, draft traffic regulation orders, will be prepared and shared for individual schemes as we go forwards with that, and those will also come back to Cabinet via the Transport Advisory Group. There's a council governance board overseeing this work, and myself as portfolio holder, and as the environment portfolio holder, but also the leader for climate change for BCP Council, are on that, along with Ray Bryan, who's the portfolio holder for transport and climate change for Dorset Council, and a councillor from the Ferndown area. The ONS board reviewed this and had some comments specifically around that governance and whether it would be more appropriate for the leader or deputy leader to be on that board. But given that we take our decisions on a collaborative basis across the whole of the work of the council as Cabinet, the important decisions will be coming back to the Cabinet to review. I think that's probably enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hadley. Just to clarify, this is agenda item 10. I named it, but I didn't number it, so apologies. Agenda item 10, Transforming Cities Fund. Do we have any recommendations from Councillor Broadhead? I believe you did propose a formal recommendation which has just been covered by Councillor Hadley. Is there anything further you'd wish to add?
Thank you very much, Chair. I think on the face of it, this recommendation is a minor one, and I completely understand Councillor Hadley's point about the collective decision making within Cabinet. However, I do think it's an important recommendation because, as we've explored, if you ever want to generate as much discussion as possible between councillors, start talking about the Transforming Cities Fund. But that is for a reason. This is an awful lot of money for government for what can and should be a transformative scheme across BCP's infrastructure. And I think the reason for the recommendation from the board was that when you have that amount of money, and there potentially will be other rounds as well, at the core of it you need to demonstrate leadership. And that was why the recommendation is as follows: to better reflect the importance of the programme and its effects on the conurbation's development, the 2 BCP councillors appointed to the Council Governance Board should be the portfolio holder for transport and infrastructure and the leader or deputy leader of the council. And again, not just about the specifics of the board itself, but very much about signalling how important the scheme is and demonstrating that leadership from the front. That was the spirit of the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Broadhead. Do we have anyone wishing to speak on this? I'll give Councillor Hadley the opportunity to come back at the end. Councillor Rice?
Hello, yeah, just starting my video. Yes, I would just like to come back on the recommendations. I suppose I would just like to highlight the way that we are very collaborative within the Cabinet and make decisions collectively. And this is maybe different from how councils have been run in the past. And this has a significant impact on sort of how we are able to provide leadership within this specific Transforming Cities Fund, but without needing to actually have the leader on the board. It's a huge amount of work, and it is appropriate that, I suppose, transportation impacts on everybody's lives, and the climate change agenda is very much about impacting on everybody's lives going forwards. And so it is a huge bit of work, and I think it's I'm very pleased to be on it.
Councillor Wilson.
I'd just like to pick up on Councillor Broadhead's point around demonstrating leadership. I think that we are a cabinet of leaders. I think that obviously, Vicky, you are a fantastic leader of the council, but within our portfolios, we all show real good leadership, and I think that both Andy and Fizz show fantastic leadership, and they demonstrate it with their passion and their enthusiasm and their want to know more and learn more. So I think that I think that they're fine on the board.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Bearing in mind that this recommendation directly names me, I'm going to just make a brief statement on this, in that I can understand the sentiment behind it, and I think that the importance of this is absolutely not undone. I think we are very clear that decisions that require change, as far as any changes within the programme, are going to be coming back to Cabinet anyway. We make collective decisions, we don't have portfolio holder decisions, specifically because we are a Cabinet of multiple parties. If we had individual portfolio holder decisions, then we would not be able to be clear that this was a collective view of the Cabinet and not somebody's view from a particular political perspective. And so that's a very clear distinction that we have made. I don't think not being on this particular governance board gives us as a council any less opportunity to lobby. My role in lobbying with government and with ministers remains. I have a working relationship with all 5 of our local MPs, and that will continue and won't be diluted by not being on a particular governance board. I just wanted to also clarify that we have a very clear direction from government around which of our projects we are allowed to be funding. This programme went up to government, came back down, but the allocation was made with detail around the projects, which can be found on page 136, of which projects will be supported. It's not in our gift to go and spend TCF monies on random projects which people have dreamt up outside of this programme. So these are the projects that we'll be funding. There are likely to be detailed specific changes, and the people who are closest to this in their portfolio, who are the right people to do that. Councillor Bryan in Dorset has both elements, transport and environment, under his portfolio, so that is sensible. And Ferndown is the area that links in with a couple of the routes, and it makes sense that their second member is also from that local area. In Dorset, they have not got the leader of the council on this programme, so it would all potentially look quite bullying if we decided to do that instead. So I'm content that we proceed as planned. If nobody else wishes to speak, I'll hand back to Councillor Hadley to sum up.
Thank you. Yes. Yes, I didn't say at the outset, so this is a partnership project because obviously some of the routes do go into South East Dorset, so the area that effectively in commuting sense and in a sort of a wider conurbation sense includes particularly East Dorset and Wimborne and Ferndown. I think that the issue that Councillor Broadhead raised is around future monies is an important one. We have our bid did have some other routes on it, and the work was done in collaboration with the Department for Transport, and they said our bid was very good, and they, you know, that potentially those there might be future opportunities. We also have the work around the physical distancing, social distancing for around COVID, and this is the backbone really to those sustainable routes, and it does sit within other transport schemes that we need to bring forward quite urgently now as part of the COVID response. So thank you. I think that's I move the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. So with that, if no one else wishes to speak, can I take this to the vote? Or if everyone is in favour of the recommendations as tabled on page 123, if anyone, I just heard a beep, but it wasn't anyone wishing to speak. If there's nobody wishing to dissent, I'm going to take a moment and see if anyone wants to vote against. No. In that case, that is also passed unanimously. So that takes us on to agenda item 11, which is the delivery of sprinkler installation at Sturt Court. This one is going to be proposed and presented by Councillor Wilson. Do I have a seconder for this one?
Yes, Leader, I'll second Councillor David Brown.
Councillor Brown, thank you very much. So, Councillor Wilson, if I pass over to you, thanks.
Hopefully this will be quite a straightforward and brief report. It's just bringing forward the recommendation of the award of the new contract for the delivery of works to install a full sprinkler system at Sturt Court. It's endorsing a previous decision made by the Old Borough of Poole Council in July 2018. The only real reason we've brought it back through is that that was a long time ago, and I think it's important in terms of the interest of transparency that we bring it back through the new BCP Council. So I'm happy to leave that as the summary.
Thank you very much. I don't have a request to speak from Councillor Broadhead. There were no recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Board. We haven't had any other members from outside the Cabinet wishing to speak, but I do have a request to speak from Councillor Moore.
you, Leader. Well, as a former pool councillor and a former PHP board member, I just wanted to add my support for this paper. I can go back on this because, as we know, the Grenville Towers fire changed many people's way of thinking, and the safety measures were reviewed for all the high-rise blocks in Poole, including the two at Sturt Court. And I remember the improvements to Sturt Court PHP previously carried out, and I would just point out that the sprinklers are not being put in to make the building safe, but will actually enhance the fire safety measures that actually are already there, and I'm very happy to support the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moore. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, just a quick comment. I'm happy to second this proposal because it's obviously enhanced fire safety management, as Councillor Moore said, and also it will ensure full coverage of sprinklers across all 6 tower blocks that are owned by BCP Council. I just wanted to draw colleagues' attention to the financial implications detailed in the report, and I'm just pleased to say that there is a 10% contingency within the budget that's been allocated for this. The awarding of the contract is within allocated resources. It won't have a detrimental impact on any other work, so I'm pleased to support it. They can go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Is there anybody else wishing to speak on this item? It's great news for the people who live there that they're going to have this peace of mind. If there isn't anybody wishing to speak on this, we'll take this one to the vote with the recommendations as per the papers. So is there anybody who wishes to vote against this one? Silent. So I'm going to take that as everybody is in favour of this and unanimously pass this one through. That takes us to agenda item 12, the Whitecliff Recreation Ground Pavilion redevelopment. This one is being proposed by and presented by Councillor Rice. Do I have a seconder on this one?
Yes, this is Councillor Allison. I'm happy to second that report.
Councillor Allison, as a portfolio holder for leisure, that's seconded. I know that we do have a recommendation from both your scrutiny board on this one, so if you could present that, and then we will pass to the Councillor Broadhead. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is a paper about the Whitecliff Pavilion, which is looking to enable enhanced sports changing facilities, permanent catering and public toilet provision within the Whitecliff Pavilion. This actually started back in 2015 with consultation. It progressed with a planning application granted in 2017 and cabinet approval in December 2017. It is now out for tender, and that closes on the 1st of July. However, it has been noted that there are covenants on the Whitecliff Recreation Ground which restrict the commercial viability of the site. Therefore, it is recommended to Cabinet to approve the appropriation of the land. During overview and scrutiny, there was also a recommendation put forward to adjust the second recommendation slightly to add in consultation with ward councillors. So I would just like to put forward that the amendment to read, members delegate authority to officers in consultation with portfolio holder and ward councillors to award contract to successful bidder following the close of tender on the 1st of July and all subsequent decisions to enable the completion of the development. It would be good to get confirmation from the ONS board that that is correct. But I'm happy to go with that recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Broadhead, did you wish to speak on this to clarify the reasons for the recommendation?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the Cabinet member for accepting the board's recommendations in full. I can confirm that's exactly the wording that we were proposing, and it is very much a theme that we've had with previous papers whereby there wasn't any political involvement in the final decision-making process. This has been a scheme that's been ongoing for a number of years. I think local residents are excited to see something happening, but obviously to delegate authority to officers to make the final decision decision without any consultation with either members of the cabinet and crucially the ward colleagues as well, I think would have been not the way to go. So I'm very much pleased that the spirit and the recommendation has been received in full. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. I have a request to speak from Councillor Moore. So would you like to go ahead, Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Lisa. Well, obviously I've been following the progress made at this site, and I am pleased that approval's been granted to redevelop the pavilion, but, and it's a big but, it is such a pity about the covenant on the site which restricts the commercial usage. This is such a really good location. I had hoped the covenants could be unpicked so we could have a really superb facility on the site. But it seems that that is just not possible. It's not going to happen, however much I wish it to happen. So I've just got to accept that I need to compromise. It's a pity, but needs must. And so I'm going to have to support the recommendation and the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. I know it would be lovely if we could develop something more substantial, but I think what's really important is the people, not just the people in that ward, but people from all over Poole and the surrounding areas who use Whitecliff on a regular basis need a facility. So I agree with you that it's a shame we've not been able to deal with that. Obviously these covenants that are put on by the landowners are problematic, and there is a limit to how much money we should be spending as a council to try and overturn covenants when potentially they may not be possible to do. Councillor Hadley, you wish to speak on this one?
So, brief. So, appreciating there's a covenant on it. This is a community facility for local use, and I'm not sure I favour creating maximum restaurant on every available site. So there is something about accepting that, you know, it's a sports pavilion. We're extending the facility and making a worthwhile place for people to stop and get some sustenance. It doesn't have to be a restaurant in every case. So I think it's a reasonable mix, taking the fact that the covenant stops us from going further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Is there anybody else wishing to speak on this? Okay, so if nobody else is wishing to speak, Councillor Rice, is there anything you wish to add in summing up, or are you content for us to go to the vote?
Just to emphasise that, yes, the whole reason for developing this is because the sports provision and the public toilet provision isn't adequate at the moment. So that is the leading reason for why it was initially started, to be able to improve those community facilities available. I am happy to move it.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. So unless I hear anyone wishing to speak or vote against it, if everyone is in favour, silence, I'm going to take that as unanimous support of that paper to move forward. So thank you very much, Councillor Rice. That brings us on to agenda item 13. Holes Bay Pool former power station site acquisition strategy. This is the paper where we have had the public statement. Just for clarity, the deadline for submitting public statements was midday yesterday. It transpires that the statement was actually received into the junk mail of the Democratic Services at 11:40, possibly received that way because of it coming from a business, I don't know, but because it arrived before midday, we are going to allow it. So I wonder whether if we get that public statement first, would that be okay, Sarah? And then we'll ask the portfolio holder to propose it. I believe this one's being proposed by Councillor Howell, seconded by, who would like to second this one?
It's Councillor Wilson.
Yeah. Councillor Wilson. Okay, Sarah, can we pass to you to read this statement, and then we've got the context of it in the presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. So the statement was received from Harbour Ambition, and Harbour Ambition wished to congratulate BCP Council for bringing forward proposals that will ultimately create a new vibrant neighbourhood and provide an opportunity to embrace innovation. We have listened to the comments made at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting, particularly the concerns raised over the timeline of the project. We believe we have identified some innovative approaches that can shorten this timeline with all the benefits this can bring. Harbour Ambition look forward to sharing these ideas with the project team over the coming weeks. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'm going to pass now to Councillor Howell, who's going to introduce this paper.
Thank you. This is a really exciting project and opportunity. For many years, at least 20 years, the Poole Council was trying to regenerate the area between at the start of it, when there was one bridge, and then obviously the Twin Sails Bridge was built to facilitate the building within the regeneration area, and particularly on the Holes Bay power station site. But unfortunately, it was left to market forces, and market forces by themselves have proved unable to deliver a significant amount of housing in that area. The LEP had provisionally offered £5 million to the developers, the owners of the site, to assist with the recreation, repurposing of the wall, the quay wall, but with that money was in danger of being lost because of the time limits on that funding. We have managed to renegotiate that funding, and that is contributing towards the purchase of this property by the council. So it's a fantastic opportunity to create a landmark development, a new place, a new community that is not a housing estate. It is a proper mixed community with facilities that promote well-being and health and culture, and it is something that could be transformational, not just for that area of Poole, but the whole town centre and the reputation of the town. I will leave Councillor Wilson to talk about the housing issues. But I think in terms of timing and the statement that was made, traditionally, on a traditional house building model would probably see the site built out over 15 to 20 years. We would very much like to bring as much of it forward as early as possible, but it's a very early stage at the moment. We still actually have to purchase it. This proposal here, this paper is about approving the principle and allowing officers to complete the purchase. Also, we need to consult with local people and develop plans that we are confident are deliverable and will achieve our corporate objectives. So the proposal, the recommendations are that we agree that the site is acquired in accordance with the acquisition proposal set out in the report, that we accept the £5 million from the Dorset LEP. The plans are prepared promptly to bring back to Cabinet and Council for approval of investment and delivery. That we agree a project team which will fit in with the Poole Regeneration Board framework, to delegate authority to the corporate property officer to complete the acquisition, and the Cabinet recommends the Council to amend the capital programme accordingly. Finally, I'd like to say I have had a question from a Hamworthy councillor, Councillor White. She says, if I'll read it out now, as a Hamworthy ward councillor, I very much welcome this proposal to acquire the former power station site. The report talks about non-design specific remediation works being completed in 2021-2022. This seems to me rather vague and unambitious. Is it not possible to start work on the essential infrastructure such as the flood wall, site levels and roads at a much earlier stage? My response to that is, if the council approves purchase of the power station site and the purchase is completed, we will be keen to move ahead with regeneration as soon as possible. The reference to remediation is general because the council still needs to firm up its approach, which will to some extent be dependent on the master plan that it develops. There may be some public realm and infrastructure works that can be undertaken at an early stage. Indeed, early development of public realm would help bring the site to the attention of more people and have a positive impact on future sales values. However, we need to be confident that any works ahead of agreeing a full master plan will not impact on the eventual layout and design. For example, in relation to the existing planning consent for the quay wall repair and quayside promenade, council officers are currently investigating whether the specification was specific to the proposed 850 dwelling development, or whether it was designed in isolation and would be flexible enough for us to be able to develop a more ambitious and sustainable scheme with a larger number of residential and commercial units. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrell. Councillor Wilson, did you wish to cover some content regarding the housing? Can I just clarify for the benefit of everybody that if you do wish to discuss the items in Appendix A, the confidential items, we will have to go into confidential, so just be mindful of that. Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, I really just want to speak more generally about what a fantastic opportunity it is. You know, we have here the largest brownfield site in the conurbation, and I think that it's well overdue that we're acquiring the site and looking to build homes on it. You know, much needed housing for our residents. I think that it's a fantastic opportunity to be really ambitious and innovative, you know, and I think we have to go forward with that mindset in creating, like Councillor Howell said, something that's really special and you know, works for the communities and the surrounding neighbourhoods and creates new communities. I think that it's going to, you know, we're potentially going to be going into a recession and unemployment, and it's going to create and generate a lot of jobs going forward, which I think is a key point that needs to be emphasised. But really, I just want to say that it's a fantastic piece of work, and I want to thank everyone who has gone through the negotiation period in getting to this point and getting this report forward. But no, I really fully support it and very proud to be seconding it.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I don't have a request to speak from Councillor Broadhead. There were no formal recommendations from the board, so he hasn't indicated a request to speak on this one. Councillor Moore, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Leader. Well, obviously, as a former Poole councillor, I have, of course, followed the fortunes of this site for many, many years. And I know that previous councils have tried to solve all the site's numerous problems. But it seems that this might now be achieved by buying the site, and then we're able to unlock its potential. And this is absolutely excellent news. And I am really happy to be able to vote for it and support it today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. Yes, likewise, this has been a very long-running saga in terms of not having something on this site, and particularly the Twin Sails Bridge was specifically built in order to unlock this site available for development. So we've taken the cost and all the grief of the Twin Sails Bridge without actually having the value from that in terms of this sustainable area being developed out, and particularly the opportunity that we have in taking it on to make sure the public realm is good and that the quayside is a nice place for people to be. So I'm really looking forward to this being built. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, just to support what my colleagues have said, actually, I've been a Poole councillor for many, many years. This has been talked about, and it's come up at a time, obviously, with the coronavirus pandemic going on, that, you know, making a significant financial commitment and moving this forward is a big decision. It's a difficult decision, but once in a generation opportunity for us to actually acquire the site, to develop it profit with a purpose, again, as was said earlier in the meeting. You know, actually we can shape what goes forward on that side to make sure it delivers for the local population and isn't merely delivering something that makes a lot of profit for a private developer. So I wholeheartedly support this. Yeah, it's a big financial commitment, and it's a massive opportunity. And it's probably one of the biggest decisions that we, as a new administration, we're a year old now as a new Unity Alliance administration here, and I think this is a fantastic way to almost celebrate our first birthday. Actually, this is one of the biggest decisions we can make. This has been waiting for 20 years to happen. So the fact that we can push it forward is absolutely fantastic news.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. It was one of the first decisions taken just under a year ago to progress this, if necessary, to a compulsory purchase and to push this forward. So it feels apt that at the sort of anniversary of the administration, that it's a decision that we are seeking to take to finalise that purchase, which is great. Councillor Rice, you wish to speak on this one?
Yes, I just wanted to say that its location is also great in terms of having declared a climate emergency a year ago. This is a project that we can really demonstrate a whole range of different ways going forward as to how you build homes, how the location can be sustainable. This location is near the beach, it's near Hamworthy Beach, it's near the town centre, and it's near a train station, and just the idea, the opportunities around how we develop this so that it is in keeping with becoming carbon zero in the future. It's just a really exciting project to be part of.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. I don't have any other requests to speak, so I'm quite happy to, unless either portfolio holder wishes to speak on it again, I'm quite happy to take this to the vote. So again, if anybody wishes to vote against it, if you could speak now. I'm going to take that silence as a unanimous vote to proceed with the recommendations as per the paper. Thank you very much, everybody, on that one. That takes us to agenda item 14, the Bournemouth Town Centre Vision Winter Gardens Site Regeneration Opportunities. This one, I believe, is being proposed by Councillor Howell and seconded by Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I was happy to second it.
Okay, so if I can pass then to Councillor Howell to introduce the paper. Thank you.
Thank you. This is another very exciting project. Again, a project that has been a long time in the making and something that we have inherited from Bournemouth Council. But to create a regeneration project on the Winter Garden site and to deliver the housing and other leisure and commercial facilities on that site that are proposed will be a game changer in terms of Bournemouth Town Centre. It's such a significant development that it will attract a lot more spending into the town centre and revitalise a part of the town which is on the Grand Gardens Walk, which was in the town centre vision, but is a weaker element of that circular walk. Most of what I want to say actually would be more appropriate after the comments from recommendations from Open Green Scrutiny Board have been stated. So I will restrict myself to just reading out or summarising the recommendations. We will propose an extra up to £7.6 million of additional council finance, less the site's lease value. We will approve the MTFP for it to be updated to include £304,000 per annum in terms of minimum revenue provision. The purchase, we will be purchasing, important thing to say, we will be purchasing some of the housing for private rented sector, and we also be purchasing the public car park. We'll be authorising the corporate property officer to agree a detailed contract, approve a 50-year lease over the private rented sector elements to Seascape Homes and Property Limited, approved the MTFP to be updated in relation to the loss of car parking income during redevelopment, and we will be recommending to Council that the capital programme be amended to include additional council finance and provisions for prudential borrowing, and finally to authorise the Section 151 officer in consultation with Councillor Brown to determine the funding arrangements for the private rented sector accommodation and the public car park. I'd just like to deal with a question that I've had from Councillor Bartlett. Two parts to this question. Firstly, it says, does the announcement that the council intends to purchase 32% of the flats at Winter Garden site indicate that the development may not proceed without the financial backing of the council through its commitment to purchase these flats? That is a hypothetical question. The analysis that has been carried out by officers demonstrates that the purchase of the flats would be a sensible and good decision in investment terms for the council, and that is our reason for proceeding, in addition, of course, to assisting our regeneration objectives. The second question is, by making this multi-million-pound investment in Winter Garden development, this will expose the taxpayer to significant risk. With the country now in recession and the uncertainty of the housing market over the next few years, is it reasonable to expose the taxpayer to the level of financial risk that will arise if this investment is approved? In response to that, I would say that this is one of the prime responsibilities of a council, is to help manage local economies through recessions and to deal with issues that the private sector really struggle with. We have this development will greatly assist us in achieving our housing targets set by government, and any profits that come out of it, as discussed earlier, will be available potentially for developments elsewhere, such as the Pavilion Westover Road Bath Road project. The access to funding itself, we can borrow at preferential rates, so that gives us an advantage over the private sector. So yeah, I am comfortable with the financial risk element. So I'd just like to hand it back to you, Leader.
Thank you very much for that. So I believe we do have a recommendation from the Overview and Scrutiny Board. So I'm going to pass directly to Councillor Broadhead to cover that, if you can.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Two recommendations from the board on this. Before I go to the recommendations, however, I just want to agree with Councillor Howell. This is a very exciting project which really helps to kickstart and continue the regeneration in that town centre area, and something that many of us have personally been involved with for many years. So it's really gratifying to see it get to the stage where we are nearing it actually happening. Also, I think the increase in the private rented sector is a positive thing as well. As Councillor Howell points out, it gives us some investment opportunities, which can hopefully help with the financial situation with the council. But also, it has the added benefit of giving us extra rented accommodation, which we've seen from other schemes that we've brought forward is necessary in that town centre area, and a real control over the kind of people that are going to be in the development as well. So I think that's another positive. And again, we've explored previously how trying to continue to ensure that the profits from this scheme help to deliver other non-profitable schemes, particularly those that we'll be bringing forward as well. So, you know, we'll continue to hold the administration to account on that. I think it's really important that we use profits from this scheme and others to help deliver others as well. On to the two recommendations from the board. The first one I'll read out is, before approving the requests for council finance, Cabinet should confirm that it believes believes the projected revenue from car parking as outlined in the report is realistic. This stems from a change in from the previously approved scheme to have a reduction in the public parking in the scheme that we're looking at now. And the Cabinet member actually made the statement at the Overview and Scrutiny Board that that was acceptable because town centre and beach car parks are only ever full during the Air Festival. But I think we actually saw from the press over the last few days that that's not quite true. So we explored whether that was an acceptable point to reduce the car parking and also the financial projections around that, just to make sure that we're satisfied before agreeing that. The second point was that Cabinet should consider whether the public benefits offered by the proposed scheme genuinely reflect the Council's ambitions for the town centre. Ward colleagues in particular, ward colleagues for the ward where this is located, were bringing up issues around some of the changes within the scheme, such as the reduction in the size from what was a supermarket to a much smaller offering, as well as leisure offerings and things. And just to make sure that whilst this is a scheme which will help us with our housing targets, that we're not gradually diluting the ambition for the other parts that this scheme was supposed to bring forward to help the town centre as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Councillor Howell, I'm going to come back to you when you sum up to cover the issues related there. But obviously, if other Cabinet members wish to refer to the suggested recommendations during their debate, then I would welcome them to do that. Who would like to speak first on this item? Councillor Hadley.
Just on the point that Councillor Broadhead made there about the supermarket, I think in the town centre location like this, having a small mini market or local type supermarket is more appropriate. We don't want to create lots of additional car trips to the centre of town to go to a big supermarket. I don't think that was ever on the cards. It is about having the access for people living in that block, the vitality of footfall in that close area. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'm very pleased to sort of second these recommendations, and I spoke at Overview and Scrutiny Board about it as well. For me, it's another sort of immense investment and immense development. It's quite a complex, legally and financially quite a complex report and complex proposal, but I'm pleased that the appendices quite adequately deal with this and explain it, and the diagrams there to make it quite clear how it works. And what I like about it is it contributes to our council's sort of corporate vision, because it's creating a dynamic place, it's investing in homes, it's revitalising the town centre, it's doing a number of things that we want to do as a priority. And what's interesting about this is the fact that the council has a sort of threefold involvement in it. We're the joint developer through the Bournemouth Development Company. As has been mentioned, we'll be an investor in terms of investing in the private rented sector accommodation and the public car park, and then we'll be an operator as well, so that we'll pass the operation of the private rented sector accommodation over to Seascape to operate that on the council's behalf. And for me, I know Councillor Bartlett sort of raised concerns about it, but in some ways it's very good timing to be able to drive this forward, because coming out of the pandemic crisis, our local economy will need a lot of support. We'll need a lot of business for local trades and local suppliers to be able to get back to work. And this will generate that over the coming years. So it's great support for our local economy. I'm pleased that in terms of all council members, because it's a complex proposal, there is a briefing next week prior to our full council meeting. So members are able to sort of understand the sort of detail of this project. Councillor Howell's gone through the financial points and recommendations within the report, some of which obviously then have to go to council. Just like to respond on the points around the car parking income, which was debated over the Scrutiny Board, and about the recommendation about Cabinet confirming that it believes the projected revenue from car parking as outlined in the report is realistic. Yes, we believed it was realistic. We've had another look at this and we're content it is realistic, because it's projecting a significant increase in car parking income, but that's for a number of reasons. There will be increases in the amount of car park charges over the coming years anyway, due to retail price index. it's also looking at what nearby third-party operators charge in terms of their car parking. So increases in the car park charges for this new car park would be comparable with nearby third-party car parks. There's introduction of new technology which will enhance the sort of the car parking revenues, and it's looking at lots of other things like car parking charging facilities within the new car park. So yes, we looked at it. We are content with it. It's been a matter of discussion. And yeah, I'm content that the projected revenue, as outlined in the report, is realistic.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. Councillor Rice.
I do have concerns around this project, and they mostly relate to the financial reliance on long-term private car use. It is also related to the expensive underground construction that is being provided to provide car storage, and the associated increase in costs of the housing, which has an impact on the affordability of housing. Going back to the financial reliance on long-term private car use, this is an issue for our council, but also all other councils in the UK, and it is not an easy issue to solve. However, it is an issue that we will need to look at as part of our climate action work going forwards, and indeed we're going to have to be working with the government to solve this issue. So I just wanted to highlight that these concerns, that I have these concerns about this and the long-term financial aspects, but we're going to be looking at what can be done for this project, but also going forwards.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Do you have anyone else wishing to speak on this one? I think there are some comments around the basement that we were hearing yesterday, that reducing the size of the supermarket to one that actually is more likely to be occupied rather than have a great big vacant space allows us to move some of the leisure offer from the basement to the ground floor, which obviously reduces the cost of building out that basement and the materials and things, so the environmental impact. I think it's also worth mentioning that Homes England have offered a grant on this site, which shows that they are keen to bring this forward. They also are very robust in their financial analysis, and if they believe that this project was one that wasn't actually going to stack up, they would not be offering a significant grant. So I think that's really important, and I would encourage all members of the council, including members of the Overview and Scrutiny Board and the ward councillors, to attend the all-member briefing, which is on this and on the power station site next week, in advance of them both coming to full council the following week. So is there anybody else that wishes to speak on this one, or can I go back to the portfolio holder to address the points that have been raised? Okay, Mark, back to you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown very ably answered the first recommendation or point of the Overview and Scrutiny Board, as one would expect, as he is the expert. I'd just like to address Councillor Rice's concerns. I think many of us share her wish to move towards a more sustainable transport system in this area. I mean, we are currently constrained by existing planning policies, and it would be difficult to actually provide a lower amount of car parking under the current planning policies. And I know we have we are considering as a council our revisions to the parking policy as part of the wider local plan. Also, I'd say that there is some benefit to consolidation of the council car parks. Newer facilities do make it easier to provide electric charging and other facilities, and the council, because it owns a number of car parks across the town centre, and many of those are ageing. It does have the facility to regulate the amount of parking in the future. In relation to the second recommendation, which related to the council's ambitions for the town centre, I think Councillor Broadhead did a very good job at answering his own, responding to his own recommendation, or the board's recommendation. This is a project that will deliver 800 to 1,000 new residents right into the town centre. It will contribute to its vibrancy, support businesses in that area. There will be £90 million or so of investment in local businesses. BDC, which this project is being managed through, really focuses on using local suppliers, and that will be an enormous benefit to this area. Once the scheme is complete, there will be an estimated £4 million increased spend in the town centre on an annual basis. Also, we get additional council tax revenue and business rates, and also some great public spaces will be created as part of the project. Among them are a new piazza at the junction of Exeter and Cranbourne Road, a linear park alongside Cranbourne Road, other publicly accessible open spaces with opportunities for outdoor cafes and children's play areas, a widened landscaped pedestrian area along Exeter Road. So it very much fits in with the council's vision for the future of Bournemouth Town Centre. And finally, I'd just like to comment on the supermarket issue. I think it's important with a scheme of this scale and complexity that we allow some flexibility in terms of use. It takes a long time to get a project like this to delivery, and market forces and environments can change in that period. So, you know, it inevitably the offer in terms of detail will change over that period. And yeah, I think we have to accept that we depend on the experts who we are using to commission and build this to advise us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I think that draws that item to a close. So if nobody else wishes to speak on that. Okay, so if we go to the vote, so this is the paper as originally proposed without any amendments taken. If there's anybody who wishes to vote against or to abstain, if you could speak now. If not, we will take it as unanimous. Okay, so I have heard nothing, which means that we will take that as unanimously passed by the Cabinet. This one does go forward to full council on the 9th of June. So that moves us nicely on to agenda item 15, which is the Children's Services Capital Strategy. This one is being proposed by Councillor Moore. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Councillor Dedman, happy to second, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Dedman. So with that, I'll pass over to Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Leader. Well, the purpose of this paper is to agree the longer-term capital priorities, provide an overview of estimated funding to deliver these priorities, and agree an internal governance process to approve decisions regarding the school premises. It's estimated we will have 3.9 million unallocated government capital grant available to fund future schools and children's centres capital projects, and Appendix A refers to this. This funding is ring-fenced as 1.9 million basic needs funding, 1.8 million school condition funding, and 0.1 million SEND funding, which we actually approved at the last Cabinet meeting. The new capital projects include the 1.9 million basic needs funding, and the proposals are Pool North feasibility study, 100,000 has been allocated. We've got 3 large housing developments that are going to be built in this area. Estimates indicate there will be a need for an additional 2 forms of entry in the primary sector, and the study will look to see whether any existing school can be expanded or whether a new school is going to be needed. We also need to provide additional capacity at St Aldham's, and 460 to 610,000 has been allocated. 2 parts to this project. One is to remodel the existing space to make it more suitable, and 390,000 has already been agreed for this work through delegated powers, as it's a matter of urgency because it's all needed for September. Also, the addition of a 4-classroom modular block to increase capacity at the school from 150 to 180. There's Ocean Academy remedial work. 50,000 has been allocated for this. This is a newish primary school which requires some remedial work, and council's share of the cost was previously agreed by a predecessor council when the school was built. So the work is needed to complete the legal transfer to the Academy Trust. It goes on for 1.8 million capital maintenance. That's conditioning funding allocated, which includes 100,000 to carry out condition surveys at 17 schools and learning centres, conditioning work to maintain schools, an estimate yet to be prepared, but to carry out work costing under 100,000 for schools. Condition work for children's centres which require work, and that's 10,000 allocation. Condition work to Linwood School, the estimates to come, but there's a maximum spend of 150,000, and emergency condition works to maintain schools, health and safety issues, and 50,000 has been allocated for that purpose. Regarding the 2 special schools, Winchelsea School, 100,000 allocation for feasibility plus, as the school has got a combination of sufficiency, suitability and condition issues, with a large amount of existing provision delivered through temporary accommodation. Basically, the school's got a capacity for 96 students, and we need to make it more suitable for the 120 pupils who currently attend, and also we need to find out what's possible on the site. And Linwood School, again, another 100,000 allocation for a feasibility study to carry out suitability improvements, and again to find out what is possible at the site. Well, there's 2 sites at Linwood. Lastly, I need to mention the governance process, which is in line with BCP financial regulations and is listed. I also want to add that ward councillors will be contacted regarding any school or children's centre projects taking place in their ward. And I know that there have been a few hiccups regarding the timing and procedure for this, and I do apologise for all the upsets and anxiety caused. However, I am assured that this has now been sorted out, and ward councillors will be fully consulted in a timely manner in future. There are also additional projects not included in the current capital strategy, but which may need funding in the future and result from the feasibility studies mentioned in Appendix B. In addition, paragraph 14 lists projects which again are not included in this Cabinet decision, but which also might require funding in the future. I ask Cabinet to support the recommendations as listed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. I know we don't have a request to speak from the chair of the Open Scrutiny Board. I'm not sure he's still on the call. I think he's declared he's got nothing further to speak on. Can I just say that I'm absolutely delighted to see St Aldham's needing reconfiguration because of their numbers going up. You know, St Aldham's has been, for those people that don't know, a very, very rocky journey. Changing its names 3 times in my memory, and trying to reinvent itself and create a brand new space. I should declare a local interest in the fact my husband works at St Aldham's School as the catering manager, but I don't think that's the reason why so many children are now wanting to go there. it really is great to hear a school that was listed as one of the worst schools in the country when I first became a councillor, now requiring space to grow. So I'm incredibly proud of that. I completely support this strategy. We need to invest in our children's futures. Brighter futures is one of the main commitments that we've got, and what better way could there be than actually investing in the spaces that they need to learn. Councillor Dedman, can I pass to you?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, I was happy to second that because I'm, like you, very, very conscious that our children are our future. And obviously, coming from the Christchurch end of the new three towns, we've been under Dorset for our schooling, and which has been fine. And I'm hoping that we will, we will do very well for our children in BCP. We are going to be increasing our needs in the future. We have some housing estates coming up, and obviously that will be taken into consideration when all these plans are put into place. So thank you, very, very happy with it.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'm pleased to support this report. I've got just two comments. Firstly, I'm pleased a sort of local interest about the £100,000 allocation for the Poole North feasibility study, and as my colleague said about housing developments in the area, and I'd just clarify there's one housing development which is being built out at the moment, about 324 homes, and two for which there is planning applications but haven't yet received permission, so they're in the process. They're not definite, so we will see what happens with those. But yeah, it's great to sort of be on the front foot and be assessing what the education need will be if those go ahead. I just also wanted to draw colleagues' attention to paragraph 13 in the report. I think Councillor Moore's covered the finances very adequately there and the potential future projects, but it's just that previous councils have always had to draw on non-government grant funding sources to actually be able to progress our sort of education capital programme. But we just need to be aware that obviously there is a lot of competing pressures on our capital funding, especially after years of austerity, and that there's a lot of difficulty in sort of raising funds for these sorts of projects. It's great to see that we can actually kick some of these off and move these forward. And I think we just need a lot of determination over the coming years that we will do what we can to sort of adequately find the funding to actually push things forward and improve the education provision for children throughout Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Do we have anyone else wishing to speak on this item? No, so if nobody else wishes to speak on this item, are we okay to go straight to the vote as tabled? Anybody wishing to vote against or abstain? So silent, so I'm going to take that as a unanimous vote for this paper. Thank you very much. That brings us to the final substantive item on this paper, which is the traffic regulation orders. Now, we do have traffic regulation orders on a regular basis on the Cabinet report, but it is worth mentioning that the traffic regulation orders would normally go via the Transport Advisory Group. The Transport Advisory Group gives the opportunity for ward councillors and people who are affected by their regulation orders to discuss them in a bit more detail. The Transport Advisory Group then allows debate and allows the portfolio holder to then form an opinion that he then brings to Cabinet. It's worth recognising that the decisions are always taken by the Cabinet, but usually the discussion and debate will have been had in the depth at the Transport Advisory Group. We have all been, as we mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we've all been circulated the full papers, as we would also already have, but in this case also a number of emails that have been received, photographs and representations by people who had in the main submitted their representations during the consultation period for each traffic regulation order. So we, portfolio holder is going to make reference to some of those. We're not going to list the names of the individuals because that would be inappropriate in a public meeting being recorded. So can I pass to Councillor Hadley to present the paper? Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Councillor Dedman, happy to second, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Dedman. So, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. I don't know whether you'd like to take these individually, or certainly the ones for discussion, because there are a lot of them. But if I take them through in order, so the first one is Aston Way. This is an industrial park. It's a road that previously was built by the developer and has just been handed over. The roadway is just being handed over to us as the local authority. It does already have WO lines. They were as part of the construction of the site, and there were 8 objections and one supporting letter to the original advert. We have had a very detailed letter in from a business in the site concerned about the restrictions, suggesting that parked cars reduce the speed, and concerned about where staff will park and whether our plans for park and ride are coming forwards. He's also given us some comparators with various other sites in various other roads in the area. I do intend to write back to him in detail because he has listed an awful lot in his letter. But I think the key thing for today probably is that this is us adopting an estate road that already has WO lines on it. They haven't been enforced because it's not been a public road, and clearly he's now concerned that because it becomes local authority road that we will be. But he has also listed that that he's out there himself telling lorry drivers they can't park on there. So I think there's something about in order to keep it clear, there's a bend in the road, there's a turning head at the far end, and actually there would be a short section that you could potentially allow parking on one side of the road, but there's a lot of heavy vehicles using this road, and it seems appropriate to have the WOs as the recommendation. Second one is Seascape Close and Tollerford Road. This is about access for the fire service to get up to the Heath. We know with the fire at Wareham recently that...
Councillor Hadley,
yes.
Are we going to take a vote on these individually or collect, because it may be that there are different decisions?
Absolutely, okay.
I just think it would be safer to actually take them individually for the benefit of those people watching who may be interested in one or the other. So on the item 16A, which is the Aston Way, is there anybody wishing to speak or speak on this one? So if nobody wishes to speak, bearing in mind we have had all the representation, so we have had the same information as Councillor Hadley. Is there anyone that wishes to vote against the adoption of these as per the report? Or to abstain? In which case that one is passed through unanimously. The second one then, Councillor Hadley.
Second one, Seascape Close, Tollerford Road, set out in B. So this is about the fire service having access to the Heath. Effectively, it's parking on the road that doesn't allow them to get access to the fire gates. One of few accesses for them onto the Heath, and there's been a mix of representations, no new representations to this committee, so it's as in the report.
Okay, I do have a request to speak on this one from Councillor Moore.
Yes, yes, thank you, Leader. I wanted to speak because obviously this is in my ward, and the residents of Steeple Close have contacted me about the proposal to extend the parking restrictions and wanted me to speak on their behalf. I would just add that the houses here literally back onto the heathland. They enjoy the stunning, uninterrupted views, and there's a footpath leading from Steeple Close onto the Heath, where there's a choice of, I think it's 4 walks. It is very popular access point for heathland walks, and it's used by many people from across the conurbation, and not just dog walkers or local residents. And of course, it's been extremely well used during lockdown. Even I've managed to use this one. There is a fire hydrant and existing parking restrictions to access for emergency vehicles, and it is well used by the fire service when heathland fires occur, which they do every year. The problem is that because Steeple Close is a popular access point, cars are actually parking right up to the double yellow lines. In the event of a fire, the fire engine would not be able to get right the way through. And I don't think it's true to say that cars could be moved quickly in the event of a fire, especially if the Heathland Walk to Camford Magna or Bear Wood has been chosen by the car's occupants. Most residents of this close do support these parking restrictions because they remember well the Big Heath fire of 2006, when the fire was so close to their properties, the heat caused damage to their houses and gardens, affecting fencing, guttering and conservatories, and residents had to be evacuated to the nearby Ashdown Leisure Centre. They asked me to tell you they would prefer double yellow lines rather than risk delaying the fire engines. So I ask you to support the TRO. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor. I think we had a similar experience with Upton Heath with the houses that are technically in Corfmullen, but literally at the end of the road where I live. And of course, we've had the devastating fire that's burning a week on in Wareham Forest. So, from my perspective, anything that supports the fire services recommendations there is good with me. All of those houses, I presume, do have off-road parking, driveways and or garages, so they're not going to be denied the opportunity to park their vehicle. Okay, Councillor Hadley, do you want to add anything, or are we happy to go to the vote on this one?
Happy to go to the vote. Either.
Okay, is there anybody wishing to vote against or abstain on this one? I hear silence, so in that case I'm assuming everybody is content to vote for this one. Okay, Councillor Hadley, that takes us to 16C, which is Deer Hay Lane.
So this is as part of the work around the townside scheme, the remodelling of Deer Hay Lane and removal of some barriers, and as a result the deliveries for the pub have been stopping outside the pub on the side of the pub, which creates an obstruction for others, but it's also concerns about the impact on the pavement, which isn't built for heavy lorries. The brewhouse objected to the order. We've met with them and agreed a better place for them to unload at the front of the pub. So this is to confirm no waiting at any time, no unloading alongside on Deer Hay Lane.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Do we have anyone wishing to speak on this one? Got no request to speak. So we're happy. Anyone wishing to vote against or abstain on this one? No, so we're happy to take that as per the recommendations. That's passed in favour. That takes us to 16D, which is traffic regulation order for North Street.
So this is very close to the last one. This is access off of Towngate Bridge onto North Street, which is really only bus and taxi access one way, and effectively the signage isn't as clear as it could be, and particularly the businesses in Winchester Place are concerned about their access. They do have access at the back, but because of the changes we've made on the bottom of the Hulls Bay Road, that means that it's slightly more complicated for them to get out and away from town. It needs to be made as given. They do have access at the rear, so they objected, but I think the recommendation is to go with the order as proposed.
So the challenge doesn't prevent them from accessing the staff car park, it just means they have to go a little bit further.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have anyone wishing to speak on this one? Okay, no one wishing to speak. Therefore, is there anybody wishing to vote against or abstain on this item? Silence. So I'm going to take that as unanimously passed that traffic regulation order for North Street will come into force as per the recommendation. 16E, traffic regulation order for Sherwood Avenue.
Sherwood Avenue is in Parkston Ward, is close to Poole Park, and there is quite a steep brow of the hill which has WO lines on one side already. This is to put them on the other side of the road. The only objection was actually asking for us to extend the WO lines further than in the plan. We can't do that with going out to advert again, so the recommendation is to proceed as the recommendation.
Thank you for that. Anybody wishing to speak on this one? No. Anybody wishing to vote against or abstain on this one? Take silence as assent. So we therefore unanimously approve the traffic regulation order of Sherwood Avenue. The next one, 16F, relates to Douglas Gardens.
This is a quite narrow back road up near Pottery Junction off Ashley Road. There's obstructed parking. The refuse trucks struggle to get round the bend and to use the road. 11 people supported the restrictions. One person objected to them, and the recommendation is to make the order as proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Anybody wishing to speak on this one? Silence. Anybody wishing to vote against or abstain on this one? Okay, in that case, I'll take that as unanimously approved as per the paper. The next one, 16G, Traffic Regulation Orders, Sub-Report G, Sultan's Road.
So this is Sultan's Road near Ashley Cross Centre, and this is about 2-hour limited wait for this. There have been some concerns raised about WO lines across people's accesses to their individual properties, but in terms of making it cohesive and sensible for use, the suggestion is that we should go ahead as planned.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Looking at the report, we have 71% to 29 responses in favour. Ward councillors have been consulted. Do we have any comments from the ward councillors that have been submitted for us to read out today on this particular one or not?
No, nothing on this one.
Okay, that's fine. Anyone wishing to speak on this one? No. Is anybody wishing to vote against or abstain on this one? No. So in that case, we'll take that as passed unanimously for Sultan's Road. 16H, Sunridge Close. Can you introduce that one, please, Councillor Hadley?
So Sunridge Close is a narrow cul-de-sac which is very close to Bishop's Oldham School. There are particular problems at school arrival and departure time with people parking in the road and obstructing driveways and that sort of thing. There is a concern about access to the emergency services, and we have had 4 representations, 1 from the local council and 3 from members of the public to us to Cabinet today. All of those supporting the restrictions, although one feels that they should just be made at school times. If we did that, so school times during term time, if we did that, it means a lot more signage to cover the variation in the measures, and probably a lot more confusion amongst when people can and can't park. So the recommendation is to make it a permanent change. Councillor Trent did send a statement. I don't know if he wants that read, or we're happy just to go with he supports it from fire and ambulance access on this and other similar roads.
And I believe he has been involved with this one for some years, so I think this is something that has finally got to the top of the pile, which is good for Councillor Trent and his ward colleagues. So does anyone else wish to speak on this one? No. Anybody wishing to vote against or abstain on this one? Okay, in that case, we'll take that one as passed by Cabinet. The next one is South Hill Road and Sunnyside Road, 16I. I think we've had some representations on this one as well. We have one representation with a lot of detail. So this is a mini roundabout. It's a slightly strange road configuration. Particularly one of the arms of the road is a very steep downhill one-way road towards it. There's a lot of road parking in the area, and people park actually on the mini roundabout itself, which is just really dangerous. So this is just about trying to stop people parking on the mini roundabout. The letter we've had, as I said, it covers a whole series of parking issues, but it just says there are too many cars in the area, really, parking inconsiderately, and including some people heading the wrong way up the one-way road, which is really dangerous because it's a really steep hill. And in support of what we're doing, but I think wanting a lot more measures than we're proposing here. So the recommendation is to go ahead with WO lines on the mini roundabout. But for clarity, we can only go ahead with items that are in the traffic regulation order as advertised. Looking at this one on Google Maps, there is parking available for each of the properties close by, so it does appear to be just multiple vehicles. Is there anybody wishing to speak on this one? No. Anyone wishing to vote against or abstain? No, in which case that one is also passed as per the regulation order. So 16J, K and L are the sealing of multiple small spaces, etc., aren't they? Do you want to just explain those ones, and is there a need to take those individually for any representations we've received?
So I don't think we have had any representations on these for today from members of the public. This effectively is the follow-through process to finalise the orders and make the orders as previously advertised on these, and many of these have been without any objections. So it's individual parking spaces disabled and those sorts of things.
I believe there was one representation that I certainly received from a resident who was having a named, a general space turned into a named space. And having read the representations, I was very happy to support the proposal for a named space on the basis that if other people who live in adjacent properties also have the need for a disabled space, they can make a request for a disabled space. And if somebody has genuine needs for a space, then we need to make sure that they can access parking where they require it. Councillor Debman, you wish to speak on this one?
Yes, I only want to comment on the one that has come in from Whitecliff, which I know about. And yes, it's one on Lymington Road, and it's a no parking at any time one, which Councillor Hadley has got on his list. Yes, there have been no objections to that, and I'm very glad to see it, because parking on Lymington Road is a nightmare. So we should try and stop it if we can. Thanks, Leader.
Okay, so bearing in mind these are slightly different to the previous ones, these are sealing up of the ones that have already gone out, then is there anybody wishing to vote against or abstain on any of these? No, in which case we will pass those through. So that is 16J, K and L approved as per the orders. That takes us to the final item on today's agenda, which is the Cabinet Forward Plan. The Cabinet Forward Plan was published yesterday, so it can be found on the Council website. You don't need to go into the Cabinet papers to find it. When you go into committees and you look down the right-hand side of the page of the website, Cabinet Forward Plan has its own subheading, and it shows you what Cabinet is likely to be discussing right the way through to early next year. It is regularly updated, so if people are interested in knowing what we're going to be talking about, I would encourage you to have a look at the Forward Plan. And if you have concerns, questions, or want to get involved with making comments, then please do check the dates of the future Cabinet meetings, engage with your ward councillors, and make sure that if you do have any comments that they are received prior to the deadlines. So I just would like to thank everybody for their attention through this 2.5-hour meeting. I'm grateful to everybody for using the RTS button very well. We haven't had too many delays from people having to turn their buttons on and off. So I'd like to thank everybody and enjoy the rest of your day. I will be taking a short pause for a cup of tea before I sign back on at 1 o'clock for Facebook Live.
Leader, I'm sorry, just before you close the meeting, I was just following that last bit. Can you confirm, or can somebody confirm that you did say item M as well on the traffic orders?
Oh gosh.
I heard you say J, K and L. I wasn't sure I heard you say M, the confirmation sealing of the ones for which no representations were received.
Thank you for clarity on that one. I was looking down the outlines as you suggested, and I did not see M on there.
Ah. Could we also just note M for those for which
M
no
had not had any representations received. Are we content to approve those as advertised? I'm taking silence as assent. So, yes, Chief Executive, we are content to approve those under item M.
Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. So unless anyone has anything else and nobody has pre-notified any other business, at 12:21 I will close this meeting formally.